Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Baby Life Hacks. Today we have an amazing woman with us, Chloe Jo Davis. She's the founder of Girly Girl Army, which is an eco-vegan fashion site. But she's here today to talk to us about a topic that's really near and dear to my heart that I love, and that's attachment parenting. So welcome. So nice to have you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about how did you get involved with attachment parenting? What is it exactly for those that may not be familiar with it?
So I had no idea what attachment parenting was. My parents parented me very traditionally. A friend of mine had a baby, and I was at that age where all my friends were starting to have babies, and I went over to her apartment, and she said, he's sleeping, and I peeked in the room, and he was on the floor on a mattress, and he opened his eyes, and he smiled the biggest smile I've ever seen and reached up his arms to hold me. And I always loved babies. I'd always had a lot of experience with babies, but I'd never seen a response like that from a child in my life. I was like, what is this baby? What are you doing differently?
Right.
She said, attachment parenting. So I went home being the young woman who wanted to have kids person that I was. I immediately Googled, started doing my due diligence, and found that this type of parenting wasn't actually a style of parenting. It was just trusting your instincts. It was baby-led and mother-led. It was basically just nurturing your child 100% and not listening to sort of like the male indoctrinated rules of the 40s and 50s that were brought to our country, but just really going back to basics, like holding your baby and being close to them. And so Dr. William Sears, Dr. Sears coined a term, attachment parenting. And there's 7 B's, and if you don't, the basics, the most important parts of the B's, I think, are the breastfeeding, bonding, baby wearing, bed sharing, baby-led weaning, believing in your child when your child cries, and bonding. Did I say bonding?
Yeah.
I might have. But the point to me, there's a lot of criticism from feminists, and I am a strong feminist, saying that the advent of reinvigorating attachment parenting is the antithesis of feminism because it's making women stay home again. But that's actually not true. Some of the most powerful attachment parenting advocates were the working mothers who created infrastructure for pumping in the office place and made that legislation happen.
Right.
And there's easily a way to just take little bits from things that resonate with you and leave the rest. And I feel like it's that way with everything, even with veganism or with eco-conscious living or with, sustainability. Not everybody's going to go live off the grid, but surely we can all put our cans in the recycling bin.
Right.
So for me, it didn't come easily either. I mean, I knew I wanted to parent this way, but breastfeeding for me wasn't this thing that just sort of happened naturally. I mean, it was agonizing. It was biting a cloth next to my bed for 3 months, bleeding nipples. But guess what? The second baby, it was easy. The third baby, it was cake.
Right.
So it's this kind of thing where you make choices. What are you going to stick to? And honestly, for me now, I've been breastfeeding for 8 years. Without a break, and I'm now breastfeeding an almost 3-year-old. None of my others went this long. They all went to 2. I did baby-led weaning, and they told me when they were done. This is one of the things I'm honestly most proud about in my entire life, because I'm someone who could tell you I didn't have this kind of upraising, and I know it, and I feel it. And there's a loss every day that I remember crying in a crib. I remember my parents doing Cry It Out. I remember that feeling of loneliness and they don't really love me. And even as an infant. So I'm evidence of those memories stay forever. And
Right.
They have you. So I chose the opposite.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's one of the things that I always talk about in my childbirth education classes, like the dangers of letting babies cry it out. I'm glad you brought that up.
People don't realize that it's not just parenting and instinctually factual, it's scientifically factual. I mean,
right.
The oxytocin and prolactin benefits both the mother and the child, right? So it's like there's no negative to doing it this way. We've just been taught that it's barbaric to have our breast out for our baby, and it's barbaric to let your baby sleep with you till they're not scared anymore. And there's nothing barbaric about it. I feel like, honestly, it's barbaric to do it the other way. Like, put your child in a crib, which is basically jail, with bars, and let them be alone when the world is scary. I don't want to be alone in my bed. I can't imagine that a 1-month-old would want to be alone.
Right. And that's something I've always been an advocate for is if you're thinking about something for parenting, apply it to your relationship or yourself or to an adult. So if you were crying on the couch, sobbing, and your husband came home from work and walked past you, totally ignored you, went into his study and absolutely did acknowledge what you were going through, like how long would that marriage last? Not long. Because you're learning like, wow, this guy, he doesn't have my back. He doesn't care about me. Ooh. And we have, as adults, we have coping skills. These babies, they don't have any coping skills, and we're just going to put them in a crib and let them cry and expect them to like trust us. Well, that's very fundamentally unsound, in my opinion.
That's a brilliant analogy. And I also feel like anybody who's a huge advocate for cry it out and for sort of more traditional Ferber type parenting should really read that study. I think it was in 1998 about the Romanian infants from the orphanages and
that
how
was a very sad story.
I mean, the detachment and how it followed through for their whole life and affected them forever. I mean, there are actual things that happen when you cry, and that affects your brain long term.
Right.
And I'm evidence. I mean, I always tell people, like, I have anxiety, and I'm pretty positive it's because I was allowed to cry as an infant, because I have these memories, and it's all sort of, it's like this ball that's been so tightly crocheted that you can't, once it's done, it's too knotted to take it apart. It doesn't matter if you get a lot of love at 3 and 4 if your mom let you cry forever. So I feel like women just really, like someone said to me on the street when I had my first something, and she disagreed, but she goes, you know what, mommy knows best. And that's been my mantra, because whatever my instincts tell me, I have to believe are right. I would want my child to feel pain like I would want my own self to feel pain, which is never.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. Can we talk a little bit about what are some of the true benefits of opening up your mind to attachment parenting, and what the benefits are long-term for babies and moms, right?
You know, I think that the cynics should hit the neuroscience aspects first and learn about the effects on the brain. Mayim Bialik's book, Beyond the Sling, is a really great starting point. Mm-hmm. Reading the studies, the Romania studies, because some, you know, it just depends on the people, right? Like there's some people who just naturally will see an animal and say, I don't want to eat that animal, that hurts my heart. And then there's other people who want to read the China study and really hear the epidemiology, you know, behind why we shouldn't eat animals and the study. So it just really depends on where you're coming at it from. I'd say, look, the proof's in the pudding, meet some kids who've been attachment parented, see if you see any difference. Do your due diligence, and then trust your instincts. Like if your instincts tell you to go to your baby, go to them a million times when you hear your baby cry. I can't ever imagine ever letting my child cry. I mean, there's shit fits happening naturally, right? But like an infant just needs their mommy. And so like, I just say, put your baby on in a baby carrier and don't take them off. Just breastfeed them and wear them till they're ready to move and circumnavigate the world. The world is a scary enough place to be. The world needs more love, not less love. We shouldn't be refraining from hugging and kissing. That's insane. You know, all these things that seem so obvious, like gun control, you know, after yesterday and all these children losing their lives, it's so obvious to anyone who's of rational, sound mind and body. And I feel like it's the same thing with parenting. It's just very clear cut. Like your baby needs you, go to your baby.
Yeah. And it's not a burden. I mean, we had these children because we wanted them. So I find it very interesting for women to be like, oh, I can't do that, or that's too demanding, or, you know, my mom or my grandma has said XYZ. And I always tell the story about the bride who is making a ham and she cuts both ends off the ham, and the husband says, why are you cutting the ends off the ham? Well, that's a lot of money. And she says, well, I don't know, that's how my mom made it. So lo and behold, at the end of the story is, well, that's how grandma did it. And they said, well, why did you do that? And she said, because it wouldn't fit in my pan. Like, but those are some of the same things. Like, we really have to figure out, are these things making sense? Why are we doing them?
Well, Karen Dawn, the wonderful animal rights author, once said to me, if you can't change your mind, are you sure you have one? So,
oh, I like that.
So I've always said that to myself about everything. So I second guess everything. I question everything. And I think I was very militant about my attachment parenting beliefs out, when I had my first. And when I was meeting mommy friends, if they had very differing views, I'd immediately, cut them off in some ways, because I'd say I can't relate. I can't imagine. And now having 3 kids, I feel like my Weltanschauung so opened that I can see why people would choose that route. They're exasperated. They have no support, whatever it is. You know what I mean? There are reasons for everything. So, even if you're just doing one piece of the pie, it's better than no pieces. It just encourages empathy. It's just the responsiveness. You never forget your parents being responsive to your every whim as a baby, as an infant.
Yeah, it's imprinting.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So what's the sleep component with attachment parenting?
So what's interesting is there have been studies done where they've found that infants and mothers will go on the same sleep pattern while sleeping together, sleep rhythm. They'll start falling into the same sleep rhythm and the same breathing pattern. And that's why there's a lot of science that harkens the bed sharing as not a risk of SIDS. In fact, the opposite,
right.
Because our breathing, is sort of keeping them going, because we fall into the same breathing patterns. I believe in that deeply. I've always had my kids in bed with me. And I think for me, that's one of the strongest components, is sharing a bed. And that's something for sure working mothers can do. So it's sort of like something everybody can do. I find that bed sharing, you actually get much more sleep.
Mm-hmm.
There's no getting up to make a bottle. There's no getting up to sit in a rocking chair and breastfeed and burp. And you literally, this is me sleeping. Here's my boob and it's out. And then it's a sort of like a self-serve situation.
Yeah, it is.
You dream nurse throughout the night, and there's no waking up in terror or fear. It's just very natural.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100% that that's the first breastfeeding thing I teach, is to teach it laying down. Like, that's the most important breastfeeding skill that the first time new mom needs to know. And I remember it being like 6 or 7 weeks, I would wake up and they were breastfeeding. Like, the sensation would be like, oh, and you're right, you just kind of dream breastfeed throughout the night. And then later on, when I had my second one, I just remember, like, I'd roll this direction and feed the 3-year-old. I'd roll over this way and feed the newborn. And I did get a lot of sleep throughout that night, though. And I was breastfeeding 2 of them at the same time.
Wow. Yeah, I always wanted to tandem nurse, but my kids self-weaned.
Right.
So it never happened for me, but I would have loved to have done it. Who knows?
It's a really neat, it's a beautiful experience. And the funniest experience I had with that was when my second one was born and I got engorged. I remember telling my 3-year-old, can you come help mommy? And he's like, I can't, Mom, I'm so full.
So you nursed all the way through your pregnancies?
I did nurse through the pregnancy because I didn't tell my doctor that's what I was doing, so no one told me not to do it, right? Because I was just going off what I wanted to do.
Instinct.
My milk did disappear, and my son said, he called it Mimi's. There's no Mimi's in there, but he just kept going at it. And then one day he's like, Mom, there's Mimi's in there. Like, my colostrum happened. And I was like, oh, great. It does require a lot of commitment because you're so painful when you're pregnant. But just the joy of that experience, and I always wanted to do the 2 together. So yeah, it was a really cool experience.
So I did breastfeed till like halfway through each pregnancy, but then they weaned then. So I just missed that window. And
yeah, they say the hormones can make it taste, but my son he breastfed for 4 years. So
the thing I find fascinating, you brought up something really interesting, that you didn't tell your doctor, and you innately probably knew that your doctor would tell you something that you didn't want to hear. Mm-hmm. And I feel like doctors are not lactation consultants. Doctors are not nutritionists. Mm-hmm. They cannot tell you what's healthy for you to eat and what's healthy for you not to eat. They've maybe had 2 hours total in medical school on nutrition. Mm-hmm. We cannot trust our doctors as gods. we need to look elsewhere. We need to look for the information elsewhere. We need to become our own experts. Experts are made, they're not born. So I think that there's so many women who are walking around looking for their pediatrician. I constantly get comments like, oh, my pediatrician told me not to put the baby in the bed. That's the worst thing I could do. Why are you asking your pediatrician this? What do they know about that? They only know if your child has, the flu. I mean, they don't know the whole picture unless you see some amazing holistic-minded pediatrician who's done parenting courses and is a parent to multiple children that they actually raise themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You have to trust our instincts and stop trusting everybody else. Like I always say to people, don't listen to me. The proof's in the pudding. Go out there and meet other moms who've done it like I've done it. Talk to people, read a lot of books, watch a lot of interviews. Mm-hmm. You've got the full picture. Attachment parenting is not telling you to do anything within the confines of its sort of ethos that's out of the box of just normal instinct. It's just instinct.
It is. And I remember just exactly what you're saying with my first son. And I remember he was in the bed with me, and my ex-husband, my husband at the time, had said, well, how long is he going to be in the bed? Like, what's going on? And I said, I don't know. I've never had a kid before. I'll let you know when it's time. And it wasn't time until Connor was like 5 or 6, and he just wandered off to his own bed and was like, that was it. He was done. He never came back. Like, it was his decision.
That's
but
right.
I didn't know any of this. You know what I mean? I was just, I was born and raised in Utah. We had a big family. I just seen these types of things. I started babysitting professionally at 11 around the neighborhood. And you're right. I didn't know what I was doing. I just went off what I thought was best for my baby. And guess what? He's a brilliant 20-year-old who's thriving in life. I mean, it worked.
I've seen the grown-up children of attachment parenting families. And I'm sure the studies are coming if they don't already exist, but I think there's less of them on Prozac and Paxil. I think that they're probably more successful in life, if not just emotionally successful.
Yeah. You really do have to prepare these newborns for the emotional concept of like what, I used to say, I'm not raising children, I'm raising men. Like we're going to put these humans out in the world. They need to have certain skill sets, and that bonding with the parent is such a foundation for that.
And the world is hard enough.
Right?
Trust, they'll cry enough when they have their first heartbreak, when they don't have enough money for rent. They're going to cry. This world's heartbreaking, but they don't need to cry then. So why would we invite that in? And so what we do in our house is we sort of have an open bed policy. Mm-hmm. So we have 2 king-size mattresses on the floor. I sleep on one with the 3-year-old who's still nursing. And my husband sort of like in the middle of the night wanders to the other one because we know that the other 2 are going to sort of like, we call it whack-a-mole. One goes down, one pops up. And if there's air, we don't have to like go back and, bring them back, redirect them to their room and keep them, rub their back for half an hour. You can just come in the night, but we still get our moment at night to hang out, just the 2 of us. That's a concern a lot of moms have going into this, right?
Yeah. That was my question. Yeah.
So if your room is big enough to have 2 mattresses, obviously that's been an awesome plan for us, but we didn't always have it this way. Often we just had 1. But what's great about 2 is that if you have an infant sleeping on 1, you can wander over to the second and hang out, watch TV, be romantic, whatever, together. So what we do with the older ones is when they felt old enough, we put them in their room together and they wander in as needed. Just sort of like organically when they need support or when they feel like they need their mommy or their daddy.
Right. And don't you find it interesting, people that aren't like bed sharing, like why it just seems to me like, okay, I'm going to be a parent all day. I'm going to be a great parent, but at night I'm turning off the parenting. I'm putting them in their own room. I need my sleep. Like you have to parent around the clock. It's like that commercial. There's no sick days for moms. There's no sick days for dads. Like nighttime is still a really crucial point in parenting.
Yeah, it's funny because one of my aunts, I remember she has 4 kids and I always sort of looked up to her because she raised these amazing kids and she was like super mom. But she said, oh, at 7 o'clock, they went in their rooms and that was my time. 7 p.m., that was my time. And I know what that means. That means there was a lot of crying behind doors, and I couldn't imagine that. Like, maybe the glory is doing it a little later in life or early in life, because then if you do it very young, you have your sort of 30s and 40s and up to yourself. And if you do it in your 40s and late 30s or 30s, you've lived. So you don't like, oh, I'm not going to the party. You partied plenty. And that's sort of like how I felt. It was like, okay, I'm giving my next 15 years to this. This is what I do now. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I am not interested. Like if my friends can't meet me during the day, then oh, well, my kids come first. And that's where I'm at. It's okay to be like that. You don't have to feel weird. Like there was an email going around with my 3-year-old's class about like a mommy's dinner. And one of the moms said to me, like, why don't you ever come? Because they do like nights out and dinners, and there's no shame in doing that. But I don't want to be shamed for not doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's strange that in this modern time, you're the freak for wanting to stay home and make sure your kid doesn't wake up upset, or wanting to be home for bedtime, or I just don't want to miss that stuff.
Right. And I remember hearing it so much when my kids were little, like it goes really fast, Chriselle, like be really present in the moment. And sometimes, you know, and I've talked about it in my other stuff that I do. It was a very abusive situation that I was in. And so for me, I just was in survival mode. And I look back now and like, gosh, you know, it did go so fast. Why waste? I just like tell the moms, don't waste those times letting the baby cry, or, you know, missing those opportunities, because all of a sudden they're 18 and 20 and they're gone.
I mean, I can even see it with my kid who's almost 8. He was a newborn 5 seconds ago. Right. So I said to my husband the other day, like half of it's done. Like he'll be 16 in 5 minutes.
Right.
And then, you know, this like mommy, I need my daddy, they're going to always need us, but it's a different kind of need, you know? And the truth is my youngest is almost 3. So let's just say in a year or even 6 months, I can go out for dinner without like it being a trauma if someone wakes up and, you know, and my boob's not there. I'll never regret these years in a million years just for a dinner. Like there's always room for that. There's always time for that. You're not missing out on anything. The only thing that matters is your kid.
Right. And yeah, I was the same way. I never really did too much when my kids were real little either. And you're never going to look back and go, gosh, I wish I wouldn't have spent so much time with my kids. Like you're never going to say that. Yeah. No. Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure. Any parting nuggets of wisdom on your way out?
I don't know. It's, you know, a lot of that, there's, my building is full of nannies, and I'm one of the only women, and I live in New York City on the Upper East Side. And so it's a not only nanny culture, but a weekend nanny culture. I mean, there are very few parents raising their kids here. And so I stand out like a chupacabra here. And all the nannies always say to me, you do it like we do it in our country. You just do it. And they don't call it attachment parenting. They just call it parenting.
Parenting.
Right? Like they all bed shared. They all breastfed till the kids were 3, 4. This is natural. So don't question yourself. Go with your gut. There's always support. There's a community everywhere. If I can be like the hippie weirdo breastfeeding bed sharing mama on the Upper East Side, then be it anywhere.
Right. That's a very good point.
I always respond to emails, and I get so many, and my website's full of 25 years of archives on this topic and beyond. We have some incredible doctors who know about attachment parenting and breastfeeding, who speak on the subject, who write on the subject, and there's a community for you. So you never have to feel lost or alone in this, because parenting, you know, it does take a village, and we're all doing it alone, and it's not supposed to be this way.
Right.
So reach out, find your tribe. Find your tribe.
That's a great thing. So where can they find you?
I'm on all social media at Girly Girl Army. It's GIRLIE GIRLARMY. And my website's the same name, girlygirlarmy.com.
It's an awesome website. I spent a lot of time on there. It's a great information today. I'm so happy you spent some time with us today, and I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for your inspiration about your son. I have a lot to look forward to.
Yes, you do. Thank you.
Bye.